Given that he spends hours upon hours every week with a microphone in front of his face, it's only natural that Joe Rogan has found his name in the headlines more often than most. Whether he's commentating for UFC, performing stand-up comedy, or appearing on his podcast, Rogan is always liable to say or do something that turns the world on its head. So for today's video, we're going to bring you 10 times Joe Rogan shocked the world. He said what? The UFC debut of Jon Jones was a moment that will stick in our collective memory for many reasons. For one, it was the first time most of us had witnessed one of the future GOATs competing in the top flight. On top of that, we were also given slight glimpses of his athletic potential as he battered Andre Guzmão from pillar to pillar using a wide range of wild techniques. But above all other things, Jon Jones' UFC debut brought us one of the most bizarre lines of commentary ever delivered by the great Joe Rogan. At the beginning of the fight, when Mike Goldberg introduced both Jones and Guzmão by color of their shorts, as he's done thousands of times before, Joe decided to interject, deeming it's easier to refer to them as Jones black guy, Guzmão white guy. All in all, the moment was a pretty hilarious break from tradition, one that even Goldberg seemed shocked by. Joe is never afraid to ruffle a few feathers in order to make a point, and in this case, his blunt approach to calling it as he saw it left us with one truly hilarious moment.
Short black trunks for Jones, white trunks for Guzmão.
Or black guy Jones, white guy Guzmão.
That was said by Joe Rogan.
A badonkadonk. The UFC lightweight clash between Frankie Edgar and Tyson Griffin is a pretty interesting fight for a number of reasons. It was the UFC debut for the future lightweight champion Frankie Edgar, and all in all is a pretty impressive showing from the answer, a unanimous decision victory that saw both men take home an additional $50K for their fight of the night winning performances. But as far as we're concerned, this bout truly does stick in the mind because of one particular comment Joe Rogan made after noticing the monstrous size of Tyson Griffin's legs. And in fairness to Joe, the dude looks like he does 1,000 squats a day, something Rogan picked up on immediately. Turning to Mike Goldberg, Joe said that if Griffin was a girl, he'd have what would be described as a badonkadonk. Not only was that one of the strangest things you'll ever hear on a UFC broadcast, but it was without question one of the funniest.
Tyson Griffin got some serious leg kicks. If he was a girl, you would say he has a badonkadonk. That dude's got some thick legs.
You saw this coming. When you're the owner of the biggest podcast in the world, there's certainly a level of responsibility that you must take over even the smallest comments you make. And in this case, Joe found himself in the headlines for a very brief mention of USADA in a conversation about Conor McGregor. As we all know, the Irishman has been making efforts to bulk up recently, adding several pounds of muscle to his frame in order to take another stab at competing in the welterweight division. But once Joe Rogan had a bunch of his friends start to discuss one particular photo of Conor, the famed podcast host unwittingly got himself into the headlines. Obviously, McGregor looks pretty jacked, having bulked up considerably since his last outing, using the time he has spent recovering from injury to reshape his frame. But at one point in the chat, Rogan said that USADA would likely be coming to check in on him, which, when you hear it in the context of the conversation, was pretty tame comment. As you would expect, the sports media had an absolute field day, calling the comments accusations, which in reality, they probably weren't.
That's him now. He's super jacked.
Whoa.
USADA's gonna take a visit to
That's
him.
Conor?
Yeah.
Right now? Oh, dude, he looks like he's about to go WWF.
Yeah.
He looks soft. In Joe's defense on this one, the poor guy didn't realize his mic was on, but even still, this pre-UFC 194 comment left a pretty bad taste in the mouth of those who saw it as an inappropriate thing to say for a man in Joe's position. The fight was Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor, a battle for the featherweight title that would end in feud that had been drawn out for months. Of course, the fight would end in just 13 seconds, but the Irishman earning featherweight gold in the most dramatic fashion possible. But during the walkout of the champion Aldo, Rogan, whose mic was turned down but not totally muted, the commentator openly suggested that Jose's body looks different, somehow softer, strongly suggesting the presence of steroid use. Again, he didn't know he was on air, so he was speaking without a care for how his words may come across, but all in all, the people were left pretty angry by this very public accusation.
You bring the lights up on the chair down. You get blocked there. Look how smooth his body looks.
Yeah, he looks good, huh, Joe?
No, he looks soft.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he looks soft.
Yeah, around the middle, you're saying.
Boxing versus MMA. Back in the earlier days of Zuffa-owned UFC, there was a real push from the promotion and the sport as a whole to try and move away from the more extreme image the sport had in the 1990s. With Dana White installed as president, the idea of MMA being a real competitor to boxing was largely laughed at as the mainstream public continued to see the sport as little more than excessive brutality. So when Joe Rogan decided to go on ESPN, the country's biggest sporting network, and argue MMA's corner on live TV, it was seen as a ballsy move. However, when the debate began, Rogan's ability to make his point was truly commendable as he knocked aside every hollow criticism that was thrown at the sport. All in all, this was one of the more eloquently delivered defenses of the sport that we've ever seen, and for Joe, a great example of how good he can be in an argument.
Well, I certainly think it's a permanent part of the sports culture. It's a much more exciting sport than any of the other combat sports that are out there right now, and that's why it's here, and that's why it's the fastest growing sport in the world. How is that human cockfighting? You know what that is? That's actual fighting. You know what boxing is? What boxing is a very limited form of fighting. It's kind of a silly agreement. Say, like, we hate each other, we're going to fight, we're going to duke it out man to man, but we're only going to use our hands. That's it. What ultimate fighting is, it's the actual sport of fighting.
Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. His kicks. If you thought Joe was simply a fan of MMA, think again. We all knew that Joe had been a martial arts enthusiast long before he signed on to become the UFC's color commentator. But what many fans didn't know was that Rogan is actually the owner of some of the most jaw-droppingly powerful kicks you will ever see. Seriously, even the great Georges St. Pierre was left totally gobsmacked by the sheer power Joe was able to generate, calling his spinning back kick the most powerful he's ever seen. If it hasn't been made perfectly clear by now, Joe Rogan is just about as far from a one-trick pony that you'll ever get.
Sidekick. It's got much more power.
Joe gets bested. You'd be forgiven for thinking that a stand-up comedian of Rogan's stature would be all but certain to dominate any exchanges with hecklers. At this stage, especially in this age of the internet, getting heckled on stage is just part of the job. And for the most part, Joe is pretty damn good at holding his own against the very random verbal attacks he generally gets. However, on this occasion, we have to say that Rogan lost this round by way of a clear 10-8. At a UFC fan event, Rogan was asked by a random crowd member about the possibility of a wrestling match between them, with the caveat being that if Joe loses, he must go to Sweden. In classic Rogan fashion, unwilling to give an inch, he asked the fan what happens when he taps him out. And from there, one of the MMA's first legendary memes was born as the fan makes his stance on tapping crystal clear. Even Joe was caught a little bit off guard by this one, and his reaction truly says it all.
Yeah, thank you. Can I wrestle Joe Rogan, and if I win, you come to Sweden?
Huh? Sure, get up here. What happens if you tap? That's all I want to know. What do I get?
I black out before I tap out, bitch.
I love you, Joe Rogan. Sometimes in the role of a UFC commentator, you have to take a risk. You have to make decisions on the fly that will serve the broadcast well. And though there have been more than enough cases of Joe getting it wrong, on this UFC 22 main card cash, to say that Joe knocked it out of the park would be putting it lightly. After Sean O'Malley put on a dominant 2-round showing against Andre, a freak injury to his leg left him completely incapacitated coming into the final stretch. Against all odds, O'Malley survived and was awarded a clear decision victory. Normally, fighters in such agony would be left to go straight to the hospital, but in this moment of pure inspiration, Rogan decided to interview Sugar Sean as he laid on the ground, suffering tremendously from his broken leg. What we got was one of the most unique interviews you are ever going to see. A star was born, and though it's not an approach that would work most of the time, on this occasion it paid off massively.
Sean, congratulations. Tell me what happened with your foot.
The inside of it, I can't feel it. It went numb, and I couldn't even step on it. I think it was a question mark kick. Oh, it really hurt. And then taking this fight with me, nothing but respect. I love this game. I love the talk. I love the media, and I love everything about this sport. And I love you, Joe Rogan.
Well, I love you too, buddy. Listen, man, what you did tonight was really fun. You're an incredibly promising young prospect. I hope your foot heals up as quick as possible, and I really, really enjoyed your fight tonight.
I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone that came out to watch.
You'd be surprised. Joe Rogan is a man that clearly understands the meaning of the words tough love, and as far as the fighting career of his friends Brendan Schaub was concerned, Rogan seemed to have no problem putting Schaub in an incredibly awkward position live on air. Brendan had run into a real wall in his pursuit of the UFC heavyweight title, losing in brutal fashion to Travis Brown prior to the appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience that would change his life forever. Joe basically put Brendan on the spot and asked him to really question what it is that he wants from the fight game, reminding him that he is lucky enough to have a real path in life outside of fighting. He then went on to explain that the levels that exist in the game and how Schaub, as confident as he is, would get absolutely manhandled if he ever competed against Cain Velasquez. Call it overkill or tough love, but the end result was nothing short of shocking for those who tuned in expecting to see a little more than fun, entertaining chat between these two comedians.
And it's not that you don't try hard, it's not that you're not dedicated, it's not that you're not disciplined, it's not that you're not intelligent. There's shit that other people can do that you can't do. If you had a wrestling match with Cain Velasquez, how well do you think you'd do?
Straight up wrestling?
Yeah.
I think people would be surprised.
Really? You think so?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be surprised.
Mm.
I really do. I think you'd fuck you up. There's a certain amount, there's a bridge between you and the very best guys in the world. And I don't know if you can cross that bridge. That's the reality of life.
I felt the tap. Okay, so this next one wasn't exactly shocking because of Joe Rogan alone, but the fact that he allowed it to happen is what really seals its place in our list. Joe has since said that he will no longer interview clearly concussed fighters after knockout defeats, although he doesn't always stick to this. But after Stipe Miocic defended his UFC heavyweight title with a brutal knockout of Alistair Overeem, for some reason, Joe thought it would be a good idea to interview the clearly confused and hazy Overeem. What followed was without question one of the most awkward post-fight interviews of all time. Overeem supposedly felt a tap from Stipe during a tight guillotine that he latched onto prior to his defeat. The replays would later show that there was no tap, but Joe, in a truly ill-advised move, decided to press the issue, leading to what was an unfortunate and embarrassing moment for the Reem.
Obviously, the fight did not go as you wanted it to, but you did have your moments in the fight. You had him hurt, at least it looked like you had him hurt. Give us your thoughts on what happened.
I believe when I punched him, when he went down, I followed him, I got him in a guillotine choke, and I clearly felt a tap. The ref didn't see it, the ref didn't jump in, so the fight continued. But in my opinion, he tapped, and it's a bummer.
We'll take a look at the whole thing in slow motion. Tell us when you see the tap. Here it is, you got it locked up. We'll take a look at it one more time from another angle and see if we can isolate it. Where do you see the tap?
And that will just about do it for this video. What's your own personal favorite Joe Rogan moment over the years? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.